Welcome back. You're watching Daybreak, and thank you for staying with us. We'll sample your feedback in the course of this broadcast, and we are talking about the national dialogue from the lenses of young Kenyans. For this broadcast is tailored to take the account of young Kenyans as to what they think and feel about the direction the country is taking, with a major focus now on the National Dialogue Committee that's conducting its sittings at the Bomas of Kenya. And with me in studio are just a representative of the young Kenyans in the country. First, as I come to you on the question of governance, because economic empowerment largely informs the decision you make in life, be it at the ballot, how you progress, the decisions you make even in your own personal capacity. Yes. Is that why? Because young persons are not united? Is that the reason?
Yeah, it's true, and it's a fact that young people are not united. Like me now, I can say I'm very sad that I'm not at 4 years. I only have 1 year to exit the youth bracket. I have not enjoyed the benefit that's associated with the youth. Now, as they normally say, being a youth is like a smoke. When it's gone forever.
You vanish.
Yeah.
So me, I'm very sad. I only have 1 year to exit this bracket of the youth. I have not enjoyed. I have not seen the sense of the importance of being a youth. It also applies to the rest of Kenya. We are here today as youths. Maybe in the next 5 years, some of us will not be in the youth bracket. And even those who are old now, they were youth one time. So when we are youths, we talk about the empowerment, we talk about passing policies that improve the life standards or the livelihoods of the youths. But as soon as you exit that bracket, you start talking other things. And you can see like 70% of our country comprises the youth. That means the policies that the countries make should be targeted at improving the livelihoods of the youth. Even the national budget. The national budget, a lion's share of the national budget should go to the youth, because actually we are the majority. But we talk about the youth, we talk about being united. Like now, today, a youth can rise up or can contest for presidency. We talk of being united, but if today a youth runs for presidency, you will not see youth supporting that person. You will go to Nyanza, they'll be voting for their tribal chiefs, Raila Odinga. You'll go to Rift Valley, they'll be voting for the tribal chiefs, William Ruto. You go to in Eastern Province, they'll be voting for Kalonzo. But if a youth today contest for president, you will not be supported. The same, even me today, if I contest for governor in my county, youth will be talking that will support one of our own, but when it goes to the ballot, they don't vote. So it's a fact. As youth, we are not united, but we only talk on unity using our lips. Okay. But after that, we don't take steps.
Thank you. Diana, is therefore a mind shift needed? Because when you sell your proposal to me, expecting my vote or my mandate, and then I suddenly vote for an older folk, I mean, is there a mind shift that's needed which should inform the support for each other and the point of convergence that you have talked about?
Yeah, for sure. We need to have a change in mindset, especially as young people who are visioning to be future leaders. So we really have to change our mindset. And I'll just concur with my brother here, because even where I come from right now, there's a lot going on with the 2027 election. They're already saying, oh, this one, no, I think this one has money, we should vote for him. And I don't think that is the right direction to go. We already have the zeal, we already have the power, we are learned, and I think we can also play a part in the leadership in our country. So as young people, we really have to change our mindset and even have some civic education to ourselves, because there are things that we are currently not doing right, and maybe a shift of mindset will work for that. Yeah.
Okay. Andrew, Ruth had pointed out a very pertinent point, and this is the dislodging of the status quo at the moment, because every formula seems to, on paper, beautiful and that can be worked on in terms of deliverables and implementation. What then needs to happen? Who is the holder of the button and the trigger point to inform the point of unity? And will that come, in your view, under the circumstances politically that the country is experiencing?
My understanding and my position is that Kenya does not lack in papers. I've actually interacted with so many people at the right offices and even within spaces where papers are produced, I mean economic and policy papers. And you realize that Kenya actually has among the best papers produced by Kenyans themselves. And even the Constitution of Kenya is ranked as among the most comprehensive pieces of law in the whole world. So it's not like we lack in how to move forward, the framework. The problem is the goodwill with which the political class, which has been given the mandate to run this entire process, then pushes it. If you look at how we are talking about the economy of this country, who then does the buck rest with? It rests with the political class. Are they intentional about doing something about it? That is the most important thing we need to ask ourselves. So Kenyans don't really have a problem with the papers. That's why even what goes on at the Bomas of Kenya, for me, it doesn't make sense as such, because if I look at it keenly, the conversation began by the fact that Kenyans were complaining about the cost of living. I have applied my mind to the whole thing, and I don't see how the cost of living can be discussed in Bomas and something concrete can come out of it. I have looked at so many other things that they're trying to do there. It goes back to, we want to change the framework of our constitution, we want to change our papers, we want to change our pieces of legislation, and that then divorces us from the real focus, which is what you're asking, the question of the economy and the value of the shilling in the pockets of the young people. In my view, we have a president in place. We have a government in place. And the government is actually all the voters, be it that you voted for UDA or you didn't vote for UDA. The person in charge right now is just the administration. Ruto is just the administration. Yeah. Actually, if Ruto were to leave power today, for whatever reason, the government will run. Even between the transition when Uhuru was leaving and Ruto was getting into power, there was a government in place. So therefore, we need to understand first and foremost that the government is the responsibility that we take as young people and equally as citizens. I have said that the situation of the economy, particularly in regards to young people, needs to be looked at in a very different way. We don't need to look at it as though there's some politician somewhere who's supposed to do something about it. We need to look at the responsibility of a young person supported by the politician in office as the administration. When you talk about agriculture, which is what the administration right now is really trying to push, how then are we going to encourage our young people to divorce themselves from looking at agriculture as an outdated venture, as something that makes you look dirty? How do we make agriculture fashionable? How do we mechanize our agriculture? How do we have a conversation about land use in this country? How then does a young person who has to wait for their old man or their parent or their folks to give them a piece of land so that they can do agriculture? How do we change the conversation so that as a young person, you finish school and you can actually practice agriculture and make sense out of it? How do we talk about innovation? How do we encourage our young engineers? People came up with M-Pesa and it really changed the entire structure of our economy. How do we encourage more and more innovators to come up with ideas of how to change the economy, how to get avenues of creating employment for their colleagues? And let me shock you, Ayub. Kenyans, particularly young Kenyans, are very industrious. I mean, guys are doing magical things out here. If you go to the universities, if you go to the colleges, and even the most basic of tertiary institutions, guys are doing great things. That all we need from the government, which is actually part of us, is to just support what the young people are doing. But you asked a very important question also about how the youth are going to galvanize and harmonize their ideas and maybe move in one front. Look at Uganda. When Bobi Wine was coming up, Bobi Wine was not to replace Besigye because he was a young person. He replaced Besigye because he had a track record of what he was doing. And Ugandans could actually see this is the right person to replace Besigye. Actually, at no point was the whistle blown and told that Besigye was going home. It was just something, out of nowhere that Bobi Wine was becoming more popular. Even in Kenya today, if the youth of this country want to have a position on the table, we must divorce ourselves from looking at ourselves as young people and all the time thinking that being a youth is a disability. It is not a disability. We have to look at ourselves and look at what we can do for this country. That track record in itself will inform the manner in which even the young people will have faith in us. Thank you. And Bosibori, one of the other major issues that came up this week before the National Dialogue Committee was a proposal by Nandi County Senator Samson Cherargei, who came to power in 2017 as a senator, of course, within the bracket of being a young Kenyan, with a proposal to increase the presidential term limit by 2 years. Is that an area of interest for you guys?
Not quite. Ayub, you understand that in every market there's a madman. So I think Cherargei is lost in the conversation, and that I think his aspirations are different from the whole conversation going on in the country. And I think he was just trying to appease some quarters, but then it ended up embarrassing the whole fraternity. So for me, what we should look at is how we can empower our young people. And of course, we cannot just talk about empowerment if we do not start from the basics. And when I look at empowerment models and whatnot, for me, I look at the education framework in this country. You understand that there is a huge income inequalities across board, and therefore it starts from the basics, from basic primary education, secondary education, even to the university. You look even at the funding model that has been proposed. So as Cherargei and the company are trying to appease their masters, for us as the youth representatives, we have to come out strongly and say that we're not going to lose track on what we need. First of all, we need to have a model that takes into account that we have different disparities across board, and that the only way we can grow our youth is to recognize that education is actually an equalizer, and that we have to start from the basics, from the funding, from the infrastructure, from even remuneration of faculty members, so that as we grow the youth, we also grow skills, because there's no empowerment without skills. We have to create skills that are able to match with the industrial needs, you know. So therefore, I would like us to look into the basic structure of education, funding models, and of course, even empowerment programs. Because right now we have a lot of empowerment programs going on. I was involved in the Ajira program. Last weekend, I saw a collaboration of Ajira and Equity Bank and even Shofco, one of the biggest circles in Kenya, whereby a lot of youth have been integrated into the system. They're learning digital literacy and fluency, and also entrepreneurial skills. So our concern right now is to match those skills to the industrial needs, and also to ensure that nobody is left behind. We march forward together.
Okay. Said, is that an area of interest? We have seen the de-association by the UDA party from the statements Samson Cherargei made. What's your thinking as a young Kenyan to that?
It's funny, you know, my sister said that Cherargei and co are pleasing their masters. He's not pleasing any master. Cherargei is pleasing his ego. We are very critical, crystal clear, that extension of tenure of a president is not a priority, and it can never be discussed anywhere in this country. So that's clear. The UDA party has distanced itself from Cherargei and his statements. The main things that we are focusing on in Bomas is, I told you, the first thing as young people we gain is the cooling of the political temperatures to avoid, and it also helped us now reduce the number of young people dying in this country because of political instability. But now the issue, the interest of UDA is to engage the opposition on a memorandum that the president sent to Parliament even before these talks.
That's in December last year.
Yeah, on the creation of the office of the opposition leader. It has been something that the president was talking about even in his campaigns. So it is necessary that we strengthen the opposition so that we have balance and check and balances in government. And the oversight role is strengthened therein. So that is one. Number two, we also want to engage the opposition on issues to do with IBC, the constitution. We have areas that are supposed to have by-elections that do not have representation, and there are no by-elections coming up because there's no IBC in office. So we want to see how the opposition can agree with government so that we can have an IBC in place. And then there is the boundary delimitation. I went to Bomas as a resident of Wajir South constituency, where I come from. We were asking for the committee to consider in the report of a marginalized constituency called Wajir South, where since independence it has never been splitted. We need a county, we need this and that, you know. So the issue of boundary delimitation cannot be done by that committee in Bomas. We know that very well, even when we were presenting. We know that it will be done by IBC. That is the constitutional mandate of the commission. But where is IBC? It is not there. And this, by 2024, we are supposed to be done with this boundary delimitation. So we are looking at those two things mainly. We are not focusing on any empowerment programs from Bomas. We are looking into the charter we had with the president. We are looking into the government situation of anchoring the young people issues into the mainstream government policy, such a thing. And then finally, if, as Wakili said, it's not a disability to be a youth, and we have to see the strength in it. If, for example, we want to change the constitution and reserve the office of the president for ourselves, which is very unfair to the old folks, we need 1 million signatures to force a referendum. That is something we can easily do without the endorsement of the president, without the endorsement of the opposition leader, without the endorsement of anybody. So the synergy and the working together of young people can only be done by, as they said, a lot of engagement and public civic education on how young people can be able to make use of their energy. And I'm sorry to my brother who is exiting the when he has not enjoyed.
Sad moment.
I hope when I'm at his age I will not also regret and not enjoying this opportunity of being a
okay. He has it majorly because of largely the desire which lacks from those who are in positions of policy, but who don't seem to be paying the adequate attention or the necessary attention on the young people and their welfare, generally the economy. Ruth, is that a priority? We'll come out to the also proposals that were made yesterday by the other stakeholders, including the former Attorney General, Githu Muigai, who said we should lessen the number of our parliamentarians to as low as 100. And this largely he tied it to budget. He said we can save on more. We'll talk about that. But what's your thinking? What's your view about the talk about the extension of the presidential term limit? Is it necessary?
You know, just like Bosibori said, you cannot respond to every mad person in the market. And my feeling is it is the completely wrong time to even not just bring it up, but even think of such as a suggestion. We are at a point where Kenya is struggling economically. We are at a point where we are just recovering from an election and demonstrations after that. Now you're talking about, you're bringing a discussion that is going to whip up emotions. And the truth of the matter is this conversation has a ripple effect. It goes down to our communities and it creates heated debates. Now, you will find, and I will tell you for free, in certain markets and in certain business centers, you will find people who have left their work to sit from 10 a.m. in the morning to 3 p.m. to discuss what the senator has said. Not because they want to do anything about it, but because it has whipped up some certain emotion in them. So I think I would not really want to dwell much on what he said, because the truth of the matter is that we are not ready to have that discussion as Kenyans. It is not the best time to bring up that discussion. And there's always a saying in my language that when the dog keeps on barking and you want to do something about it, you do not address the dog. You address the owner of the dog. So we need to start knowing where is Senator Chergai's sentiments coming from. Because this is not a discussion that he just woke up and decided to blurt out. This must have been a discussion that he has had prior to. But there's a word that keeps on coming if you've heard every other panelist talking about, and that is oversight. Strengthening the oversight role. Now the citizens equally have a strong role to play when it comes to oversight. And I'm a strong believer in devolution. Now we have a lot of focus on the national government, which is perfect. But while we are doing this, can we not forget to oversight our county governments as well? Because there's a lot of money. We're talking about the budget and the economic empowerment bit. There's a lot of money that is going to the county governments. And there's a lot of money that is going to our constituencies, to our members of parliament. Are we oversighting those people? Are we oversighting the laws that are being made in county assembly before we come and now say at national government, this is what we want changed, this is what we want added? If we are going to talk about term limits that are going to change the whole framework of the constitution, we are going to take another 5 years to first of all get, or 7 years for that matter, to first of all get used to that constitution. 5 years post the after the first election since the 2010 constitution, we were still saying, it was the first time after the new constitution, the governors were still getting used to their role, the women reps were still trying to understand how to do it. Now, it took the second cycle of election for us to know that, okay, these are the opportunities that are there according to the Constitution. This is how to navigate certain issues. This is how to interpret certain laws. Do we really want to go back there? Do we really have another 7 years where we can just whisk away in trying to understand a new framework? I think that's a discussion that shouldn't even be tolerated by Kenyans.
Diana, are you interested in that?
Yeah. First of all, I just want to disagree with my sisters by mentioning an elected senator, I quote, a mad person. I don't think that is in order, and a mad person is a mad person walking in the street naked or in a tattered clothes, and saying that Senator Cherargei is mad person in the market, I think that is not good. And we are trying, as young people who are learned, we should try and keep away from such words, because the whole nation is watching. The young people are watching. So, but again, about the issue of extension of term limit, it should not be a subject of discussion. The Constitution is very clear on that, and maybe some years to come, or our neighboring countries can have a talk on that. But for us as Kenyans, our Constitution is very clear on the term limit, and I think Senator was a bit insensitive on that.
Okay. Festus, your account on that?
Okay, my friends have had...
And you have a year to exit this.
Yes. My friends have had complaining about the term limit, because I'm very sad, I think I should say, Cherargei should think of now adjusting the youth bracket to 40 years. Extending the youth bracket to 40 years instead of thinking about adjusting the
presidential term limit.
Because you see now, currently it's now 1 year after election, and like Kenyans are tired of this government. You know, this government, the Kenya Kwanza government, had a lot of, they had a good manifesto, they had a lot of promises, they had a confusion about the Asla, the Mamamboga, the Pota. And I think that was a good and attractive argument and conversation. That's why they got good votes. But 1 year after election, as you can see now, it's like Kenyans are tired. The cost of living, this issue, the current happening in the country, is not actually good. And if we are to extend the presidential term, it will be something so disastrous, and it's uncalled for. So my friend Cherargei, I will talk to him. He's my age mate. I guess he's also very sad that he's about to exit the youth bracket. He's starting at 5, I think, next year. And I think he should have conversation now about policies, targets at improving the livelihoods of the youth, other than having this conversation of extending the presidential term limit.
Yes, Andrew.
Well, as I had pointed out earlier, we must always look at what then informs amendment of the law. What Cherargei intends to do is to amend the law and to achieve a certain end. So what is he trying to achieve? I will agree with him in parts. That one, he has properly, he's done a proper diagnosis of the problem, but we don't agree on the remedy he's proposing. The challenge he's trying to talk about is that Kenya is on a consistent political mood. That we finish an election today, the following day everybody is on the campaign mode. The opposition are in the streets campaigning for 2027. The government alike, because of checking on the opposition, is in everyday politics. We'll also have to be on the streets or in the markets trying to keep their support base intact. So the problem Cherargei attempts to solve is actually something that is acknowledged by all of us.
But Andrew, this is the point. He more or less gave out an arithmetic analysis of his 2 years. He said the first year is the post-election uncertainties in the cycle. The last year is the campaign. I mean, he intends to address a problem that affects the public, but the public are not the cause of this problem.
Thank you.
It's the politicians, Cherargei and others within the political arena.
I was actually getting...
Is it not then therefore paramount for the political establishment in Kenya to be disciplined?
Thank you. I was actually getting to that, and that is why I was painting the background of why Cherargei is bringing this up. Because I remember even in the BBI, which I was part and parcel to, this conversation came up. In the Punguza Mzigo that Ekuru Aukot was bringing up, the conversation around around the term limits came up. So it is not a bad conversation, or it is not something wrong to come up, because actually the trouble we are having is Kenya is in a consistent political mood. But this is where it comes from. It comes from our political class that is indisciplined, that does not look at the Constitution and acknowledge what provisions of the Constitution they need to adhere to at each and every junction of their journey. What our politics is all about is how to oppose the government to gain the support of the people, or how to support the government to then gain the sympathy of the government. If either of us would then look at it objectively to understand our roles as the voter, as the leader, and equally as the politician, then we wouldn't have been in this space. I'm looking at what is going on at the Bomas of Kenya right now, and you probably alluded to what AG Emeritus proposed yesterday.
Yes.
I'm wondering what exactly is happening at the Bomas of Kenya. Is this a constitutional review process? Is this a reconciliation and what do you call it? The reconciliation process where people come and pour their hearts out, as I saw IBC commissioners doing? Yes. What exactly is going on at the Bomas? Nobody understands. The terms of reference of the committee at the Bomas is not properly spelled. We just know that because there was tension in the country, the president met with the opposition leader and this came up. We need to really understand what is going on at the Bomas. Are we going to change our constitution based on this? Are we going to approach this through a referendum? Is it going to be a parliamentary process? We have had the president and earlier, talk to parliament and their leaders in parliament that he actually feels that there are some issues that need to be addressed in law. I think there are very pertinent issues that actually need to be addressed. The two-third gender rule is hanging on our heads. Okay. These things can be attended to properly without having to subject the country through this turmoil. We have the question of entrenching the Senate Oversight Fund, the CDF, and this kind of things. These are things that can be done without having to subject the country to this kind of tension. But look at what exactly the political class intends to achieve.
Right.
And let us look at it from the opposition side and the government side. What does the government intend to achieve with this? The government, in my view, and this is drawing from the sentiments of the lieutenants of the president, they don't care about the bipartisan talks that are ongoing. The deputy president has spoken to that effect. The leaders, Kimani Ichung'wah, who is actually part of the team, has spoken. Ndindi Nyoro. They are very clear, and I think their intention is to keep the country calm and to have the opposition hanging somewhere, dangling a carrot, so that things can keep moving, so that they can work. The opposition on the other end do not care about the cost of living, which is what they were actually propping there as the basis of that conversation. What they care about is what is in this conversation for us. Are we talking about the office of the official opposition leader? Are we talking about how we are going to be compensated for having lost an election? Are we talking about opening servers? I wonder to myself, there is a constitution in place where the Supreme Court talks about how to audit elections. Why do we have to subject the country through another process?
It indeed, in its judgment, had a detailed report on the analysis it did to physical ballot boxes at Forodha House in September 2022, and also the IBC headquarters at Anniversary Towers, and gave its way forward on the judgment, which was part of the judgment that the Supreme Court had issued on the 5th of September. Ruth, you seem not to agree with Andrew on the issue, but he points out a very critical point, and we have talked about this earlier. He says the government wants to achieve a sane political environment where it can govern. The opposition is there to see to that some of the issues that it outlined are followed up to the latter. These two entities seem to be feeding from the same trough, and they are united when it comes to their interests. Yet for you young Kenyans, you seem not to be glued when it comes to your interests. I mean, how can a similar move be achieved by young Kenyans to unite when it comes to your interests?
We see, actually, I was agreeing with him. It's just that I was quite saddened by the situation. Maybe that is why my nod was not very clear. Why I'm saying this is because, like he said, we have moved away from the original reason as to why we were having this dialogue in the first place. And it is even sad to note that we are in a position, or we are having a government that is reacting and not acting. Because for everything that the opposition is doing, the government is rushing to react. For every noise that the citizen is making, the government is acting to react. For every noise that the international bodies and the international fraternity is making, the government is rushing to react. So at what point exactly are they going to have time to act on the promises that they delivered? That is one. Two, really, I think it is time that the youth became selfish, just as the political class is doing. And I will say this because we do have young people who are in those legislative houses. You rightfully spoke of Babu Owino, who was complaining about, you know, the young people not being represented. Now, the only way we could come together as young people, and I feel a cause that should bring us together, is because we know we are currently not in a position to influence how those committees are being picked or who sits in those committees. Then why can't we push and influence the kind of decision that that committee makes? That is number one. Number two, why can't we come together and say these already existing processes that are ongoing, how can we ride on them to achieve what we want? Because it's a process that is already ongoing. We cannot say let's do away with the process. How can we jump onto it to ensure that what we want as young people is reflected there, is achieved in those committees? Because like Wakili said here, whatever is going on there is just to ensure that each side is comfortable.
Okay.
So how can we also ensure that we are comfortable through those processes? And that's why I said even in the beginning when I spoke, it is about time that as young people we come together, and in the different lobby groups, we don't even have to go together, but in the different lobby groups, let's push for the same thing.
Okay.
Let's use this to be selfish a little bit.
Thank you. Because we have engaged young Kenyans as well from home, let's sample some of the feedback. There are many, I understand, and see what you're saying on Twitter. And Ibrahim, can we have them on the big screen? Okay, we'll be getting to the feedback shortly on X. The hashtag is Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdi Kadir. One of the other standing out issues, Bosibori, is the presentation yesterday done by Attorney General Emeritus Professor Githu Muigai to lessen the constituencies from the current number that we have to 100. Okay, let's now sample the feedback. Here's what you're saying on XG. Wakasiaka says, as youths, we are totally against extension of presidential limit. Senator Cherargei must watch his movements keenly. Nothing for youths without the youths. Babu Michelle K says, whereas there are many issues of concern, the youths are, at this moment, Mr. Cherargei, have unfortunately seen the extension of the presidential term limit to be the most important one. It is a diversionary tactics from the real issues. I think so. Ma'ajud says the presidential term limit should even be reduced to 4 years. The youth only have themselves to blame. We are ahead of the old folk in terms of numbers, skills and innovation. We also have to change the corrupt mindset passed on to us from our leaders. Eric Riono Tukei says the problems facing the youths in there is their ability to address what's right and not allow politicians divide them based on tribe, region, education or class. Finn_Miranda says the views and the voice of Kenya youth will only be embraced on paper by the national political class. No one ever talks about their executions, nothing much, just to celebrate yet. Brian Chemo says youth often bring fresh and innovative ideas to the table, challenging established norms and offering creative solutions to pressing issues. Incorporating their voice in national dialogue can lead to an inclusive and effective decision-making process. But what Owino says, can they ask the panelists, can they talk the work and form an organization, register it today after the show and start selling the agenda for the youths? I offer my services to campaign for them here in Kisumu. Well, that's a question we'll respond to. Engineer Lazaro says it's now the time youths should change mindset and refuse to be divided along tribal lines. Their continued silence on the ongoing political matrix is the advantage of the tribal old folks to continue messing up our once prosperous economy. We'll sample the remaining bit in the course of this broadcast. And an organization to be formed. There's a challenge from the viewer Bobotieno Owino from Kisumu County and selling your ideas, because the point is when the head of state engaged young Kenyans with regards to his charter and the charter he has with youths, he came selling an idea, an agenda. That was on paper. He met you folks and he wanted power after all, again, but they are subject to, but it's subject to implementation. Can't you equally form an organization that champions for your interests and brings together a consolidated form of your ideas to sell the Kenyan people as well? Can that be realized?
Thank you very much, Ayub. And there are two things here. If you form an organization that has no backing of anybody, of institutions. When you see all these activists around, they've been funded. The main problem with young people is if you form an organization now, getting it to Thika and getting it to Naivasha is a problem. You see, if you want to start boardroom meetings around the country or public participation around the country or engage in the young people, you need finance. So, as my sister said, we need to ride on the existing systems and existing platforms. Now, as young people, we have an opportunity to take over the ruling party, UDA. There's elections coming up on December. The president has been, a fortnight ago, has been in the party headquarters until midnight. He was meeting with the national, the NEC members of the party. Today, there is meeting of the National Governing Council, all the elected leaders of UDA in Bomas. So why don't we think about taking over UDA, taking over ODM, and the contest becomes between young people? What is the problem? I'm sure the democracy within ODM is so much in question, but the democracy in UDA is above board, I can tell you. The president will serve 2 terms maximum. So what next? We cannot be talking about succession politics when we are not involved. When we take over this party is when we are going to have a platform to air our views. And the president is a listening president. And he's up to the agenda of the young people. When we talk about the borders, when you see the president going around looking for motorbikes that use electricity to go around and looking for a cheaper way of doing this and that, you know, so he's still thinking about the charter he had with the young people. He knows that there will be an election, and those same young people will be able to meet him in those platforms and those campaign rallies. So, and he's up to the issues of the young people. But as youth, we are supposed to be vibrant. As you know, UDA, and which is the most popular party today, we have an opportunity to take over the party on December.
Thank you.
And it will be free, fair, and credible.
Okay, and we know the process of political parties.
No, I want to be record here.
Yeah.
There will be nothing like so and so being endorsed by the party leader.
Okay.
Even in the elections of UDA, the president used to say, ukiwa na foto na mimi, uende huko ground, usimwambie watu ati nimekutana na mkubwa. And that is exactly why we got to as a women, you know. So UDA is entrenched, democracy is entrenched to that level, and we advise young people to take over the reins of power within the ruling party.
Okay, yes, Ruth.
I'm itching here, and I'd like my colleague let's not do what is called mixing channels and mixing issues. Because when we start to talk about the promises that were made during the campaigns, I call them mere rhetorics. And why I say that, you've talked about the borders and what the president is doing, and that is one of the most recent promises that he made. And we are rushing to get these borders on the road. Do we have the necessary infrastructure to support this borders? Because as it is, the minute we bring them, do we even have a transition plan of where the current borders are going to go to once these new ones come? So I don't know if this is a forum for us to discuss the campaign promises, because if it is, then we will be here until evening. Because truth be told, we are already struggling with the first 100 days, the promises that we were told will happen in the first 100 days. Now we are here on, some of those promises have not been achieved. Now we were told in the first year, there are promises that will be achieved. The first year is over. Those promises have still not been achieved. Now we are talking about, yes, and I can give an example. And the first example I will give, again, because I'm a gender advocate, is on the truth agenda that he said he would give the cabinet. But out of 23, how many women cabinet members do we have? So there are those that he had said that he would do within the first 100 days, within the first 1 year, and have not been done. So let's not talk about campaign promises, because if we were to look at each and every one of them as a measure as to whether or not there is performance and there is democracy in there, then we would be going backwards. But one thing I'll give UDA claps for is how they conducted their party primaries during the election. Yeah. It is one of the parties it is the only party that did elections at all levels, because most of the other parties were actually doing a hybrid between party primaries and consensus, and the other political parties were doing consensus. And that's why I kept on saying we have political party processes that do not allow young people to actually get to the ballot boxes. So for that, I'll give UDA. But as to whether or as to how they're going to conduct their party elections, we'll have to.
Okay, and we were on the presentation yesterday made by the Attorney General Emeritus, Professor Githu Muigai, and we talked about the economy here and the economic empowerment that ought to be focused on young Kenyans, you included. He says that we need to cut the number of our representatives to 100. I mean, and he says this is to cost cut and channel that or pump that money into other areas, including young people and new empowerment programs. Is that a welcome move? Bosibore, I'll come to you first. Is it an idea that we support? Definitely, yes, because we have a lot of challenges, especially on how we use our revenues. You understand that a lot of our monies collected actually go to the wage, to pay wages and to pay our representatives. So therefore, you realize that we are overrepresented. You know, you get that some regions actually have maybe less than 40,000 people, you know, and other regions have even more than 170,000 people. So we need to align those frameworks and see that representation actually happens and that we do not have overrepresentation in some areas and underrepresentation in other areas. So of course the IEBC have to look at these issues so that when it's coming up with their recommendations, we see what fits the bill. And of course we have a lot of issues with fiscal deficits. We realize that there's too much wastage of resources and of course we are not able even to pay our debt. So being able to optimize government expenditure and of course channel money where it is required is going to help us even to move forward, because as it stands, the country is headed to a stagflation. Okay. There is increase of inflation and decrease in economic growth, and which has pushed the cost of living into too high. People cannot afford food, so we cannot start again a conversation around representation. So we have to cut the wage bill by merging some constituencies, merging some counties if need be, and of course ensuring that there's no wastage of resources through accountability and integrity to the people who are supposed to take care of us in terms of the public management of finances. Diana, are we overrepresented?
Okay, well, as a gender champion also, I kind of felt discriminated with what Professor said yesterday, because the first thing he mentioned is we can do away with the women reps, which I don't think is the right move for that. In a way, yes, we are kind of overrepresented, and maybe they can think of another move on it, maybe probably doing away with the nominated MPs, maybe, because even the other day I was at Parliament and for sure it was really crowded and it's kind of stressful even to move around. So probably they can do away with the nominated MPs and things like that. But on the issue of doing pulling down the women reps, I don't think that wasn't good, because we really need to have a space as women, and the 2/3 rule still applies. And I think on the women rep, it was just okay. So probably they can do away with the nominated MPs. I really don't even understand what they do, because they are not elected on the ground. So yeah. Okay,
Andrew. In justifying his proposal, yesterday the Attorney General Emeritus, Professor Githu Muigai, said you even don't know some of these lawmakers. And the quality of service of parliamentarians has been wanting since the advent of the first parliament, that is after the refurbishment in 2013, the first elections under the current constitutional dispensation. And is that what might have informed, and do you think that we are overrepresented and there's need to cut down on the number of lawmakers?
Three things I draw from the presentation by Professor Githu Muigai. One, he attempts to paint a picture of what exactly is going on at the Bomas, and then now we are able to understand there's an actually ongoing constitutional review process. When a person of that league, as Professor Githu Muigai, takes his sentiments before that committee in that fashion, then it properly points or paints the picture that something serious is going on there. Beyond that, I will agree with Professor Githu Muigai, but also I will try to understand why this matter has come up. One, you'll see that the counties will form into economic blocks. If you go to Nyanza, there's the Lake Region Economic Block. If you go to Mount Kenya, they have their block. If you go to Eastern and Northeastern, every former province has a block. And they actually explain that it makes more economic sense that they organize themselves in blocks. But they will not accept to be merged. Yes. The reason is the politics around representation in Kenya is a very funny politics that very few people get to understand. Actually, there's a very fine line between overrepresentation and underrepresentation, particularly in the Kenyan context. We don't know what underrepresentation means. We don't know what overrepresentation means. Right now, we have boundary delimitation that is supposed to happen. The law, as it provides, so many constituencies are going to be scrapped off. But we have to have a political conversation as to how to protect these constituencies. Why, though, when the law actually provides that these constituencies, because they have not met the threshold of numbers, they need to be scrapped off? We have a conversation right now on counties that demand that they are recognized as counties based on the fact that they have considered themselves as marginalized tribes. I mean, it's just a political conversation. It doesn't make any economic sense. It doesn't make any logical sense. Everybody just wants to sit down and understand what is our interest as the Kuria, what is our interest as Suba, what is our interest as the Marakwet. I have seen that conversation all over. They also want their counties. My brother from Wajir was talking about giving Wajir a county because Wajir South a county because they've been marginalized over a long time. We need to differentiate between how to be disciplined and adhere to the law and how to play our politics. The trouble that Kenya suffers, and it might not end, is everything is about politics. How then do we make you happy? How do we make this politician happy? How do we make this tribe happy? How do we make this? I mean, it's always how to make our people happy. I know the constitution was not tailored to hurt us. Okay. The Constitution was tailored to shepherd us in the right direction. All right. We need to be more critical about how to adhere to the provisions of the law.
Besides, I'll come to you first. Besides the politics that hovers around whether it's underrepresentation or overrepresentation, but Andrew, it's one thing when you look at the conduct of parliamentarians, isn't it? And look at how it debated the sugar report, for example, in 2018 that was chaired by the current Kisii County Governor, Simbarati, and the former Kieni MP, Kanini Kega. You look at its conduct of allegations of bribery and even as many as low as 10,000 Kenya shillings exchanging hands for parliamentarians to be absent, ranking members of parliament saying that they have sent out their colleagues so that the quorum cannot be raised at the House. And the professor, from an intellectual perspective, does he have a point that if we cut on the number of parliamentarians, then number one will focus on quality, two will focus on proper representation, and then three will save on the cost. Objective. And that money can be, channeled to programs that can affect you folks.
True. Objectively, Professor is very right. Actually, look at the quality of debate even in the National Assembly. We can give it to the Senate because of the fact that they have fewer numbers. People get to have a lot of time to contribute to real issues. At the National Assembly with the numbers, when they're in Parliament, the entire House, it becomes overcrowded. Nobody can hardly get a chance. There are points of order all over. You can hardly get a chance to contribute something meaningful. So there is sense to the extent that we really need to have a conversation on how to make our parliament more effective, how we are going to limit corruption. And I actually agree with him that even the numbers contribute to the fact that corruption is brewing more in the National Assembly because of the overcrowded fashion in which it operates. Nobody really knows who is responsible for bringing money into parliament. Nobody really knows who's responsible for interacting with the guys who bring money into parliament and corrupt their processes. So we need to agree with Professor just to the extent that actually is objective to ensuring that there is quality in debate and quality in how we are getting services from Parliament. But we also need to consider that Kenya is a very political place. As we build the nation, we must also understand that we need to build the state. The common person really doesn't understand why Kibra constituency would be scrapped off in that sense. They don't even understand why a constituency in Northeastern would be scrapped off when you had already allowed them to have an MP who gives them bursaries. That is how basic they look at it. We have an MP who brings us bursaries here directly to us. Why do you want to take that away from us? So we need also to do a lot of civic education to make our people understand that it is not just about the numbers. It is not just about representation because our person is in Parliament. There is more to it than just as basic as that.
Is cutting down first on the number achievable? Do you think it can it can work to the advantage of the country in terms of the economy?
Yes, yes. I think that's a noble idea because, as you can see now, we are really overrepresented. We have the MCAs, we have the MP, we have the governors, and we have the senators. And there is a lot of confusion in the ground. We also have the administrative structure that the regional commissioner, the county commissioner, down up to the assistant chief. They are also doing representation in their nature. So having all these constituencies in Kenya and having the senators, the women reps and the MCAs, we can say apart from the overrepresentation, there is also the element of fighting for resources and duplication of duties. Like nowadays, there has been a discussion in the counties whereby the MCAs also want to have the ward fund. The other time we had a debate on parliament that they wanted to scrap the CDF, and there was a lot of debates. The county government are also fighting to have increased revenue allocation. And we also have now the senators. They're also fighting to have the Senate oversight funds, which the other time President approved. So you see, other than the representation, and there's a lot of confusion, and each elected leader is fighting to have resources, and having each elected leader having resources to run, it will bring a lot of confusion on the ground, and you find politics everywhere. An MP does a certain function, or an MP does a certain road. The county government also come overshadow. An MC also is here. You want to exercise his mandate by asking for a development fund. So there is a lot of confusion, and I support what Professor is saying. If we can reduce the number of members of parliament, even we can have the good quality debate in parliament, each member will have a chance to talk. You can now go to the current parliament and see there are members who have never even held the microphone in parliament because they don't get chance to talk. The house is so overcrowded. So if you can reduce by half, and even the counties, if you can also reduce the counties, it is the better.
That again speaks to referendum, is it?
How possible is that?
If you touch on the governance structure,
it actually.
yes, I'll come to you. Side. Yes.
I think allow me to be the devil's advocate and disagree 100% with the good professor. Why I say this is because I'm considering the rural dynamics. You see, when we are coming up with a legislative framework, we should come up with a legislative framework that works for us, not one that we are borrowing from any Western country. We need to consider our cultural and societal dynamics when we're coming up with this. And I will tell you, in a number of the rural areas, why I don't think we are overrepresented is because in some of those constituencies, they are so large that some of the constituents themselves don't feel the effect of having a member of parliament. They feel the effect of the member of county assembly most probably, but not of the member of parliament. And now we are saying we need to collapse them again. Two, we also need to consider the population, like he said. There are certain areas where they are overpopulated and one member of parliament is not able to really even just collect all their views, is not even able to, you know, because I will give an example of my constituency where I vote, that is in Karachuonyo. And one of the mode of communications we have is I know in this day and age, it's almost unbelievable, but we've got the literal messengers who wake up early in the morning or late or in the night when it's very silent. And they will go around ringing a bell to just give an announcement that there is a public participation meeting that is ongoing. Because if you put it on social media, you're most likely to get very few people. Now tell me you want to collapse this constituency and combine them, a constituency that is already so large. How is this messenger going to cover that whole area? Because we're also talking about reducing the budget. And for me, my issue is not in the fund. My issue is in the use of those funds and in the corruption. Because already, even if we collapse them and increase the fund, what is going to be so different if corruption is still going on? What is going to be so different if there is no proper oversight? It means these funds are still going to, either way, not be used efficiently. We also need to talk about, there was someone who spoke about the nominated MPs. Why I believe in this affirmative action is because this nominated MP slot has given us some of the best legislatures. Look at Millie Mabona, for example, in the number of bills she has done. She came through the affirmative action. Look at Rachel Shebesh, she came through the affirmative action. Look at the current MP of Gilgil, she came through the affirmative action. So I still think the issue is not in the number of legislators that are there. The issue is, one, in the framework. The issue is, two, in the oversight of the funds that are you know, going there. And maybe we need to now just redefine the kind of mandate to avoid, as he's saying, the duplication of work. But for me, I don't think we need to reduce the number of legislators.
Thank you. Yes, briefly to you and to you, then we sample the final feedback, and then we close. Okay.
Ayub, I want to react to that statement by Professor Gideon Mugai.
Yes.
According to me and from where I sit, that is an elitist view. You know, these are people who sit in boardrooms and who live well and have been to cities that have never been to a village, and then they talk the way they want. In terms of representation, I agree that parliaments are overcrowded. But representation is not only at parliament. When you touch on devolved units, you are touching on life of Kenyans. However much corrupt they are,
yes,
they are still serving the common man. So this is not even something that the same way we reacted to Cherargei's statement. This is the same way we are going to react to Gideon here.
So thank you.
So I think from my constituency is the size of Wajir South is the size of Central, Western, and Nairobi combined. Now you want to tell me you want to scrap that into another constituency? How is that even possible? But if there is a framework of reducing the members of parliament, but it's still increasing representation at the ward level, as my sister have said, it's much easier to fill the representation at the ward level than the constituency level. Then we can agree. And then you add more funds to the devolved units. In terms of stemming the expenses of government, and the main thing here, the elephant in the room is corruption.
Thank you.
You must reduce corruption. And government should not be scared of arresting anybody.
Thank you.
And everybody around. Thank you.
Yes, Andrew, briefly.
Well, mine would just be to say that if we actually understood the picture the writers of the Constitution had in mind when they were coming up with this, we would not be in the situation we find ourselves. We need to understand why devolution was brought in place. We need to understand why the role of MPs was made very distinct. We need to understand why the courts have made a determination that the CDF is not supposed to be run in the fashion it is happening right now. If at all our devolution worked as it was anticipated, where then money goes down to Wajir South, as my brother is complaining, and that money actually has an impact on the common person in Wajir South, there would be no trouble. But here is a situation where money goes to the county governments, it is wrongly used, it is misappropriated, then everybody goes back to the CDF that they're used to get their bursaries. If the county government bursaries were supposed to work properly, then we wouldn't have had a lot of tension in trying to ensure that our constituencies are left the way they are. The specific roles of a member of parliament
Thank you.
are in the National Assembly. They're supposed to do oversight, they're supposed to represent their people right there, and they're supposed to make laws.
Thank you. Let's now take a look at the last batch of the feedback on X. The hashtag is Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422. And Janelle Lazaro says, it's now the time youth should change mindset and refuse to be divided along tribal line. I think we had taken this earlier. Messing up our economies, okay? Dwainaina 56 says, in the symphony of life, youth represent the crescendo of possibility and the harmony of change. Their voices are the notes of the composer feature. That composer feature, yet unwritten, embrace the journey of youth leadership, for it charts the course of humanity's evolution. Sir Nixon Nduguru says, I hope this government will leave a legacy of standing with the youth, where it will be involved greatly in providing unlimited mentorship and thus produce knowledgeable youths who will be a game changer, especially in leadership circles. Sam Masik _ says, empowerment and jobs for the youth has been the greatest scam in the political realm. The politicians bring up the youth predicament to hoodwink voters, after which they disappear and start pursuing other agenda aside from youths. Yeah, Musoma says the only way the youth can be on the decision-making table in Kenya is through affirmative action. Bipartisan talks should propose a county youth representative seat to be occupied by a person who is between 18 and 30 years by the date of election. Festus apparently is out of that. And many. Tony Mwebe says the fact is the youth in Kenya exhibit similar characteristics to chicken. You just need some cash, in bracket mtama, to woo them during the campaign and dump them afterwards. The solution is massive sensitization on their civic duties at the grassroots. Honorable Lillian Sioe says the youths in this country need to own up the affirmative action programs out in place by the government to empower them economically. This includes timely loan payment of Uwezo Fund and Youth Fund for sustainability of the funds. Kiprop Kenya says, many years after independence, the conversation is still on the position of youth in governance, clear indicator that the front players have failed miserably. Ole Shonko says youth representation should also be a topic of discussion when it comes to 1/3 gender rule. 2/3 means is discussed. Otherwise, will only be a subject of discussion and not a part of representation. Frank Orinde says youth in this country have been disenfranchised when it comes to decision making. You are only considered important when it comes to numbers or the votes. Our political process is also too expensive that the youth can hardly afford. Thank you for the feedback. On the hashtag Daybreak, the SMS code 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. It was an engagement for you at home and of course the representatives here in the studio. Said Hashi is a youth leader. Thank you for your time. Diana Rotich, thank you for your time. Nora Bosibore, asante sana. Andrew Kamili, thank you. Ruth, thank you so much for your time. And Festus Rotich. This is a preserve of young Kenyans who come on board to tell us about their account and perspectives through the lens with which they view all the developments in the country. And we thank you for waking up with us here on the broadcast. We'll see you next week by the grace of God on Daybreak on Wednesday. Till then, good morning.
Jipange na View Sasa. Jipange na View Sasa imerudi